Do you feel guilty because you're indulging in a lot of guilty pleasures during the quarantine? You know, things like eating a lot of comfort foods or binge watching TV shows. Well, maybe you shouldn't feel that guilty because some of them may be pretty good for you. I'm Dr. Greg Cason, and this is Off the Couch. So, during this quarantine, I'm doing a lot of TV watching myself, eating a lot of comfort foods, eating all kinds of candy, playing video games. You may be doing celebrity gossip, spending all kinds of time on social media. And we're told that this kind of thing is actually not good for us. That we really should be spending more time with our family, with our friends, with romantic partners. But what if you don't have those people in your household? Or what if you don't have those people in your life? We're often told that not having those people around is somehow inferior, and these means that we do to get by, like spending a lot of time watching TV or even eating comfort foods, is somehow bad for us. But maybe they're not that bad. So I actually found a journal article that just came out in the journal Self and Identity by a group of researchers at University at Buffalo. And they actually took and looked at these non-traditional strategies of social support, or at least that's what they call them, things like the comfort food eating or playing video games or looking at social media, and they compared them to traditional social supports like spending time with family or loved ones or friends. And they surveyed 173 undergraduate students, and the results were pretty surprising. So if you haven't already gathered it, there are really two types of social support systems that this study looked at. As I've already talked about, there are traditional social support systems. Again, that's romantic partners, family ties, close friendships, and those are very important because people who perceive themselves to have strong social support networks in those traditional support means report having less loneliness and more belonging. And it's really thought that our belongingness to other people really evolved from our earliest days when belonging to a group really meant something and it mattered to our survival. But the researchers really wanted to look at these non-traditional social support means. And the non-traditional social support means are groups that you don't need to be necessarily a part of to identify or have friendship with to fulfill that need to belong. So it seems that all that's really needed is immersion in a crowd for something that's called collective effervescence. And I'll read to you what collective effervescence is because it's really quite a fascinating thing. I've certainly felt it, but never known what it was called. It's the feeling of social connection and sensation of sacredness that individuals experience when they're part of a crowd. And that part of a crowd, that spiritual feeling you have when you're at a music concert or you're at a religious revival or a political rally that happens to be very powerful, or even a sporting match where your team is winning, and you feel that connection with the crowd, with everyone around you, and you feel that power inside of you, that's collective effervescence. Now, collective effervescence was very important because it actually increased life satisfaction. It also increased people's meaning in life and decreased their anxiety and depression. But you didn't have to just feel a belonging to a group of people to actually feel this non-traditional social support. The researchers actually were able to identify symbolic social bonds, and those were social bonds that happened to be connections, but not necessarily to a group of people, but rather to a symbol of people. And that can be something like fictional characters or characters on TV that we've come to know and love, maybe a favorite TV show or characters that you laugh about. I always laugh about Liz Lemon on 30 Rock because she really just cracks me up, and in many ways I think I identify with her. Or it could be non-human objects like old photographs or even music or comfort foods Or it could be one-sided relationships. And one-sided relationships are things like celebrities that we follow or politicians that we know all about. And we know about their lives and we follow the gossip, but they don't even know we exist, but we feel this connection to them. It can even be, let's say, when you're in high school and you feel that you know a lot about someone who's popular in school, but they may not even know you. So the researchers really wanted to look thoroughly at this concept to really understand how these traditional means and non-traditional means of social support really help fulfill people's need to belong. They gave them all kinds of measures. They gave them social needs measures. They gave them life outcomes measures to measure their meaning in life, their satisfaction in life, to measure their social connectedness, to measure their loneliness. And then they looked at something about their need to belong, and they used an instrument called the social fuel tank. So the social fuel tank's kind of a unique instrument because it measures how accepted an individual feels in the social world. So here's a social fuel tank, and when the measure is high, when the social fuel tank is high, then a person feels more accepted and they feel a higher self-esteem. But when they feel less accepted and the meter is emptier, then they feel less self-esteem. So it really isn't just about how high the tank is that they have a high self-esteem. It's really that people, when they have a high tank, when their tank is filled, they feel more connection with other people, and thus they feel more content with the world. So when the tank is low, it's not just about low self-esteem. They feel less connection with the world, and thus they feel more distress. So again, these researchers took the 173 undergraduate students, they measured them on all these things, and then they asked them to talk about how filled their social fuel tank is. Now, how filled it is compared to a lot of different means. So the researchers took the 173 undergraduate students and they asked them to fill the social fuel tank. And as you can see, the social fuel tank here, they offered several different strategies. They offered things like pets or gaming or reading, watching TV, close friends, family, or acquaintances. Whatever it was to fill the social fuel tank, they asked them to put it in. And they maybe asked them to put it in a little or a lot. Now, people had different ways of doing this, but what was found was pretty interesting because not all of the students were the same. So believe it or not, people picked between 2 and 17 different ways that they would fill their social fuel tank. And some people, it took only 2 things to fill it up, and some people, 17 things may not have filled it up all the way. So for example, there were some traditional strategies that were very prevalent. For example, 85% of people reported spending time with family and or close friends, and over half reported spending time with a romantic partner. And for non-traditional strategies, 75% of the participants reported listening to music, and over half reported watching TV. So the researchers really looked at and predicted and found that it wasn't the number of strategies of social need fulfillment that the person used. It wasn't the number, but how filled the tank was. For example, here's a tank that has 3 things, but the tank is all the way filled, so that person's going to feel a higher self-esteem, higher connectedness, and more content. And here's a tank that has 3 things, but the tank is not all the way filled. So they may have used the same 3 things, but instead that person feels less connectedness, less self-esteem, and more distress. Now here's an example of a tank that they use a lot of different strategies, but the tank still isn't filled. So even though this person used 7 different strategies to meet their social needs, they still might end up with a lower self-esteem, less connectedness, and more distress. And here's someone who just fills their life up. Their tank is completely filled, but as you can see, there are 13 different social support strategies, in both traditional and non-traditional. And that person will feel more fulfilled, more connected, and will feel more content with the world. So really the final hypothesis that the researchers looked at, and the thing I was most curious about, are are these non-traditional social support strategies, things like eating comfort food and binge watching TV, are they really inferior? And what their research found was they're not. They really are not inferior to traditional social supports, and that seems to go against everything that I've learned in school and we've always been told. But the research is showing that there is some advantage to having these things. Now, people who have just traditional social support systems do great in the world. And as I said at the beginning, they're people who are going to have just overall better connection and less depression, less anxiety. They're just going to feel much better about themselves. But when it isn't inferior, if someone doesn't have any traditional social support systems, they can still have a very fulfilled life and still feel connected with the world. You know, I've always wondered about people who go alone to Disneyland and then say they just like being there, they just like being in the crowd. But it seems like those people really do get something from that experience. Or people who do almost anything alone and feel that connection with the group that they're with. But what's really interesting is that these non-traditional social supports actually have a few advantages. The researchers found that it wasn't just one was superior over another, but they found that the two together really had a better outcome. So the people did the best overall were people who had a mix of traditional and non-traditional social support systems. So it was actually the non-traditional social support strategies that added extra meaning in life. It makes me recall when I was a kid and I would sit at home in my room and listen Sunday nights to Rodney on the Rock. It was a radio DJ here in LA that I just worshipped, and I always made his show, and I felt so connected to the music and to the bands and to the DJ. And I was just sitting at home in my room on Saturday and Sunday night and just listening to music, but I felt so connected. And that meaning has come through in so many ways in my life, not only in connection to music, but in photographs, with certain artists, with certain things I've read over time, with movies and TV shows. All of them have added extra meaning, even though they might seem quite innocuous to other people. But it was really this mix of traditional and non-traditional strategies that really helped people. But it was those non-traditional strategies that seemed to add the extra meaning and depth to the human experience. So I think the study pretty much settles that doing these non-traditional social support strategies during the quarantine, like watching TV or reading or listening to music, or doing just about anything that fulfills you, or even wearing a concert t-shirt of your favorite concert, it can really be just that small. All of those things can help you feel more connected. So none of those are really inferior strategies, and we can just wipe that notion away. But I think this study actually has some wider implications to our society that we previously didn't think about. We can look at things like a fan of a team or a rock band or a political candidate, and we can really see that cohesion and really see that meaning that it brings to people's lives. And maybe that was pretty easy to see, but really we can understand how that really does fulfill people's need to belong. But we might even stretch it out a little bit more. Looking at things, and I find this quite fascinating, when we look at the process of something like a lifelike doll or robots that are now having a little bit more of a role in society, and things like virtual reality. We've actually looked at these robots or dolls through movies like Lars and the Real Girl or the movie Her. Maybe there's a purpose to be served here, and maybe we can't look down upon the fact that this person feels a connection. And maybe we can't look down upon people who are cat ladies or people who have these really close relationship with their pets. There might be social need fulfillment that happens in all kinds of ways with people. And maybe we just need to understand that these kinds of needs can be met in many different ways. And actually that's a good thing. Maybe it's really good that people can feel connected to the world around them, and it doesn't just have to be through other people, it can be through representations of other people and feel their connections to other people through common causes. I'm Dr. Greg Cason, and this is Off the Couch.